I'll never forget the day I saw them push Adanna into the mud. Her white cane clattered to the ground as she fell, her unseeing eyes wide with fear. The laughter of the village children echoed in my ears, a sound that would haunt me for years to come. My name is Ikenna, and this is the story of Adanna, the blind girl who changed our village forever. I was just a boy of 12 when Adanna and her family moved to our village. They came from the city where Adanna's father, Emeka, had lost his job. Our small village was located in the heart of Nigeria, surrounded by overgrown forests and clear rivers. Life here was simple, but not all was kind. Adanna was different from the moment she arrived. Her eyes, cloudy and unfocused, seemed to look through people rather than at them. Her mother, Zita, guided her everywhere, a constant presence at her daughter's side. At first, the other children were curious. They'd never seen a blind person before. But curiosity soon turned to cruelty. It started with whispers. "She's cursed," they'd say. "The gods have punished her family." Then came the names: Blind Bat, Useless Eyes, and Burden. I watched as Adanna's smile faded day by day, replaced by a look of resignation that no child should ever wear. The adults weren't much better. They'd click their tongues and shake their heads whenever Adanna passed by. "Poor Emeka and Zita," they'd mutter, "such a heavy cross to bear." No one seemed to see Adanna as a person. It was just a problem. I was ashamed to admit that I did nothing at first. I didn't join in the teasing, but I didn't stop it either. I was a coward, afraid of becoming an outcast myself if I stood up for her. Things reached a breaking point on that fateful day at the village square. It was market day, and the place was bustling with activity. Adanna had convinced her mother to let her walk to the square alone. "I need to learn," she had said. "I can't depend on you forever." I watched as she made her way carefully through the crowd, her cane tapping rhythmically on the ground. She was doing well until a group of boys, led by the village troublemaker Obiora, decided to have some fun. They started by calling out false directions, confusing Adanna, and making her bump into stalls. The market women yelled at her, not realizing she was being tricked. Obiora and his friends laughed, encouraged by the adults' reaction. Then, in a moment of cruelty I'll never forget, Obiora stuck out his foot. Adanna, unable to see the danger, tripped and fell face first into a muddy puddle. Her cane flew from her hand, landing several feet away. The laughter that erupted was deafening. Even some of the adults joined in, enjoying the cruel joke. Adanna lay there, covered in mud, her hands searching desperately for her cane. Something in me snapped. I couldn't stand by any longer. I ran to Adanna, helping her to her feet and retrieving her cane. The laughter died down as I glared at the crowd. "Shame on all of you," I shouted, surprising even myself with my anger. "How can you treat another human being like this? How would you feel if it was your daughter, your sister, your friend?" The silence that followed was overwhelming. Adanna clung to my arm, trembling. I led her away from the square, back to her home. As we walked, she whispered a quiet, "Thank you," her voice thick with unshed tears. From that day on, I became Adanna's friend and protector. It wasn't easy at first. The other children teased me too, calling me the blind girl's servant. But I didn't care. I had seen the person behind the unseeing eyes, and I knew she was worth standing up for. But slowly things began to change. My friendship with Adanna opened my eyes to her world. I learned that she could recognize people by their footsteps, and that she could tell the time by the position of the sun on her skin. Her other senses were so sharp that she could often hear or smell things before anyone else could. I started describing the world to her in detail, the colors of the sunset, the patterns on a butterfly's wings, the expressions on people's faces. In return, she taught me to experience the world in new ways. We'd sit by the river listening to the water's song. She'd show me how to identify plants by touch and smell. Her world, I realized, was rich and full in ways I had never imagined. As the days passed, other children began to join us. At first, they were just curious about what we were doing, but soon, they too were fascinated by Adanna's unique view of the world. Uju, a girl who had once been one of Adanna's chief tormentors, became one of her closest friends. "I never knew," she confessed one day, "that there was so much to see without using your eyes." The adults were slower to change, but change they did. It started with Adanna's parents. Ameka and Zita, seeing their daughter flourish, began to treat her less like a fragile thing and more like the capable young woman she was becoming. They allowed her more independence, and in turn, Adanna's confidence grew. Then came the day of the Yam Festival. It was our village's biggest celebration, a time when we gave thanks for a bountiful harvest. Traditionally, the best yam farmer would lead the festival procession. That year, our best farmer, Old Man Namdi, fell ill just days before the festival. The village was in an uproar. Who would lead the procession? Who could judge the quality of the yams without Namdi's expert eye? It was Adanna who provided the solution. "I can do it," she said. The villagers laughed at first, but Adanna stood her ground. "I may not be able to see the yams," she explained, "but I can feel their shape, smell their ripeness, and hear the sound they make when tapped. I can tell which ones are the best. Plus, I wouldn't know who owns the yams, so I can't be partial." Skeptical but desperate, the village elders agreed to let her try. To everyone's amazement, Adanna's judgments matched perfectly with what Namdi would have chosen. Her sensitive fingers detected imperfections that eyes might miss. Her nose picked up subtle differences in ripeness, and her ears caught the slight variations in sound that indicated a yam's quality. The festival that year was unlike any other. Adanna led the procession, her head held high, her cane decorated with colorful ribbons. The villagers cheered as she passed, many with tears in their eyes. They were cheering not just for Adanna, but for themselves, for the blindness they had overcome, for the light that had entered their hearts. From that day forward, Adanna's place in our village was secure. She became known as the Wise One, and she was sought after for her unique insights and judgments. Children no longer mocked her. Instead, they begged her for stories, fascinated by the way she could weave tales that painted vivid pictures in their minds. As for me, I learned the most important lesson of my life, that true sight comes not from the eyes, but from the heart. Adanna's blindness had opened my eyes to a world of compassion, empathy, and understanding that I might never have known otherwise. Years have passed since that muddy day in the village square. Adanna and I are grown now, with families of our own. Our village has changed too. We've become known in the region as a place of acceptance, where people with all kinds of differences are welcomed and valued. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Adanna and I still sit by the river, listening to its song. "Tell me what you see," she'll say, a smile in her voice. And as I describe the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the silhouettes of birds flying home to roost, the dance of fireflies beginning in the gathering dusk, I realize that I'm seeing it all through her eyes, with wonder, with gratitude, and with love. Adanna's story taught our village that our differences are not curses, but gifts, that compassion and understanding can transform lives, and that sometimes it takes a person who sees the world differently to help us all see more clearly. Adanna often says, "The eyes may be the windows to the soul, but it's the heart that truly sees." Thanks to her, our entire village has learned to see with our hearts, and oh, what a beautiful view it is. Please like and subscribe.